Hello there, I'm Manila Chan. You're watching In Question, broadcasting live from RT America National Headquarters in Washington, D.C. Here are the stories we're working on for you today. Lawyers now claiming Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou was unlawfully detained by Canadian authorities. Find out who they say the authorities were really working for. We'll give you the latest straight ahead. Plus, the latest out of Hong Kong. Today, it was actually a group of middle schoolers stepping up demonstrations in the city. We've got a full report from the ground. And finally, the Amazonian rainforest in Brazil is burning at a staggering pace and posing possible health risks worldwide. We're going to dive into who could be to blame. All right, it's time to boost your news IQ. The arrest of Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver, Canada, was the catalyst in the U.S. Huawei war. Today, her lawyers are alleging that she was unlawfully detained and questioned by the Canadian border agents who were unscrupulously working for the American FBI. To discuss this earlier today, I was joined by investigative journalist Ben Swan. I started out by asking him to break down what was in these new documents. Take a look.
The border officers at the airport in Vancouver, where this woman was arrested, when they first detained her, they actually held her for 3 hours before she was arrested and before she was notified that she was going to be arrested. But in these court documents, what we see is a breakdown of the timeline. What we did not know before, Manila, is that there was a court order where a judge had issued a warrant for her arrest. What's important about that is that the court order, according to these filings, called for her to be immediately arrested when she was taken into custody. So that legal process of being arrested, getting an attorney, going through this process would have started immediately. But that's not what happened. According to these court filings, CBP officers in Canada, the border protection officers and customs officers, took her in the airport to a secondary screening room, went through her bags, took her electronic devices, and went through those devices on behalf of the FBI to bolster the U.S.'s case for extradition and their case against her. 3 hours went by before she was notified she was going to be arrested, and they say that defied the court order.
All right, Ben. So all that said, yes, they're obviously alleging that the Canadian border agents were working on behalf of American authorities, the FBI,
yes,
and that they held her much longer than they needed to and were collecting
yes,
evidence and what have you. But does that allegation really hold water? I mean, can they prove that?
Well, I think what they're hinging this upon, again, is the actual warrant, which had specific language in it for her to be immediately arrested. When the court order, specific from a judge in Canada, specifically says, when you find her, she's to be immediately arrested, and you don't immediately arrest her. Instead, you take her to a screening area. Instead, you ask her questions. You take her devices to a separate room, and you scan them. That is really the question here. And the claim is that what she was being arrested for in Canada has nothing to do with those devices and what the U.S. wants them for. Remember, what she's wanted for in Canada, the claims that are against her there, have nothing to do with the U.S. claims that she was working with Iran. That's what the U.S. is angry about. They want her extradited to the U.S. And so this becomes a whole other issue in terms of the timeline and the timing for when she was taken and when she was actually notified of the arrest. The other important thing is, according to surveillance footage, this is what the court filings say, there were 2 police officers there also in the airport who walked behind those CBP officers in Canada, but did not arrest her either. They just monitored what was happening. So it was a very long process where she was never arrested.
Right, so
she was arrested.
They really could have easily executed the arrest then and there. So I guess that's where the suspicion.
Within minutes.
Right, that's where the suspicion sets in. So Ben, with this kind of seeming, coordination between the FBI and Canadian authorities, what does this say about the bigger picture of what the American government is truly capable of when they really want to go after somebody, or in this case, a company?
Well, it raises serious questions about sovereignty of other nations and about the rule of law in other nations. I mean, the U.S. loves to be able to go into other countries and dictate terms. This is what we expect you to do. This is how we expect you to do it, because this particular person, in this case, the CFO of Huawei, is a high profile for the U.S. as a target to arrest. The problem is that Canada has its own set of laws. It has its own rule of law. And it appears, according to these court filings, and if these court filings are true, it appears that the U.S. urged and actually convinced officials in Canada to break the rule of law in Canada, to defy the orders of a judge in Canada in order to give the U.S. what they wanted. And that becomes hugely problematic, not just in this case, but in any case where an individual is in a sovereign nation and the rule of law of that sovereign nation is not being followed.
Yeah, a very important distinction there, Ben. So where does this leave Meng on the subject of extradition to the U.S.?
Well, that's going to be the big question here. I think what it's really going to come down to is how much influence does the U.S. have over this extradition process? Can they force it through regardless of what the facts are? And again, there might be more to this story than what these court filings indicate. But I will tell you this, having covered this story now with you for months, this is a consistent claim that has been made for months. It's not as if this is suddenly a new twist in the story. It's just more detailed than what we had before. But this is a claim that's been made for some time, really since the arrest, that this was not following rule of law in Canada. Where do we go from here? I think that's a major question in terms of, will the judge in this case, the extradition judge, allow Meng to be extradited to the U.S. at the behest of the U.S., or will that judge say, you did not follow the rule of law here in Canada, we are a sovereign nation, and so we're not going to extradite her because you broke the law, therefore you violated her rights under Canadian law.
Makes a lot more sense now. As always, appreciate you looking into all of this for us. Ben Swan, thank you so much.
Manila, thanks.
All right, over to Hong Kong now. And the latest from the ongoing demonstrations earlier today, we saw a group of students take part in silent protests in the city. This demonstration was a lot more peaceful than the violent clashes we've seen between protesters and police in recent weeks. With a full report on that now, here's RT's Sarah Montes de Oca.
Several hundred students are staging a sit-in right behind me in Edinburgh Place here in Hong Kong's Central District, and they're reiterating their 5 demands. This rally is put on by a group of younger generations, middle schoolers. Students sat in small circles with teachers and social workers to discuss their concerns, something many say they can't do with their parents, who are in opposition of their political stance.
Maybe my parents don't accept my ideas, so I think talking to social workers can give me useful ideas on maybe how to face my parents or friends if we have any conflicts.
I'm here because I want the government to know that the middle school students also care about this bill. Because we are a part of this future, and this home will be in our hands, so we have to come out and protect Hong Kong.
Older generations also came to show their support.
We are not secondary school students where we are adults, but we want to show our support to them because it's not easy to them to just go here and then protest. They are very young, and they are. I'm thinking of when I was more. I didn't know anything about politics, but they make us proud because they know their responsibility, and then they just came here to protest, to do what they think is right.
This all while university students are calling for a school boycott on September 2nd, when the school year is scheduled to resume. They're giving Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam a deadline to answer their 5 demands by September 13th at 8 p.m. local time, otherwise threatening to escalate their actions and prolong their school boycott indefinitely. Sit-in organizers for the middle schoolers delivered an informal notice asking parents to support their boycott. A speaker at today's rally encouraged discussion to see what future actions should be taken afterwards. After a moment of silence, the sit-in ended with tears and a powerful sea of lights singing what's become the protest's anthem. Reporting in Hong Kong, Sarah Montes de Oca, RT.
All right, let's head over across to the Middle East. Officials in Tehran recently unveiled the country's brand new homegrown missile defense system. This system, according to their defense ministry, can detect planes or targets at more than 300 kilometers or 190 miles away. It can also lock them in and destroy them in just a fraction of seconds. RT correspondent Saya Tavenger has the full story.
Iran has unveiled its newest homegrown air defense system. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani attended the unveiling ceremony for the mobile surface-to-air system and has ordered it to be added to Iran's missile defense network. At a ceremony held in Tehran to mark Iran's National Defense Industry Day, President Rouhani announced that the Bavar system is better than the S-300 and close to the S-400, and in a much more stern tone than usual, announced that talks were useless now that Iran's enemies do not accept logic. Therefore, Iran cannot respond with logic. Rouhani further added that there is no doubt that the U.S. is not succeeded and will not succeed in any plot in the region, and that the U.S. forces would be the first to flee if danger arrives in the Middle East. Now, Rouhani also criticized the U.S. for abandoning the 2015 nuclear deal and attempting to bully and sanction Tehran into surrender. Now, Rouhani's tone was unprecedented by the more moderate president and comes at a time of very high rising tensions with the U.S. Now, Tehran began making Bavar, which means believe in Farsi, after Iran's purchase of the Russia's S-300 system was suspended in 2010 due to international sanctions and further embargoes which barred Iran from importing any more weapons. The long-range Bavar system is built to Iran's geography with a range of more than 125 miles and was created to compete with the Russian S-300 and the American Patriot. The Bavar is also able to recognize up to 100 targets at the same time and confront them with 6 different weapons. Iranian officials have also repeatedly emphasized that the country will not hesitate to strengthen its military capabilities, including its missile power, which they say are entirely meant for defense, and that Iran's defense capabilities will not be subject to negotiations. And just earlier this year, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei also called for efforts by Iran to maintain and boost its defense capabilities, hitting back at what he called the enemies for disputing the country's missile program. During a speech, Ayatollah Khamenei announced that, quote, without a moment of hesitation, the country must move to acquire whatever is necessary for defense, even if the whole world is opposed to it, end quote. And in June, when Iran shot down a U.S. drone, it was in fact with a surface-to-air missile, for what Iran blamed the U.S. for violating its airspace, which the U.S. has denied. Now, concern over Iran's missile program and regional influence was a major factor that the U.S. attributed for leaving the JCPOA. In fact, President Trump argued that the accord did not limit Iran's ballistic missile program. And on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned at a UN Security Council meeting that under the Iran nuclear deal, a United Nations arms embargo on Iran was due to expire in October 2020, and warning other nations against the dangers of ending the arms embargo on Iran. And just last month, Iran tested the Shahab-3, a medium-range ballistic missile that many believe to be capable of delivering a nuclear warhead. Iran, on the other hand, has maintained that its missile program is for defense purposes only and has rejected any negotiations over them. Manila, back to you.
All right, still to come, we'll update you on an increasing emergency taking place over in Brazil. We'll talk about it in just 2 minutes. Stay with us.
Russian Airlines.
In a world of fake partisan news, lies, and conspiracy, it's time to wake up, to dig deeper, to hit the stories that mainstream media refuses to tell. More than ever, we need to be smarter. We need to stop slamming the door on the facts and shouting past each other. It's time for critical thinking. It's time to fight for the middle, for the truth. The time is now for watching closer for watching the hawks.
I've seen the horrors that arise when money and evil combine. Corporate criminals who trash countless lives to add just one more dollar to their billions. They threaten, they bribe, they'll do anything to keep their crimes in the dark. But the people they've hurt are demanding justice. Their stories need to be told on America's Lawyer.
There's so much going on in the world, don't you think? When's the last time you had a real bird's eye view of things? Shouldn't the news be more than just hours of bickering? Give me 30 minutes, and I'll take you across the globe. A surge of record wildfires are devastating the Brazilian Amazon, while the nation faces growing international criticism for failure to protect the world's largest rainforest. What we know so far, 74,155 fires have been recorded as of Tuesday of this week, which represents an 84% increase in fires since 2018. 41.7% of those fires have taken across 3 Brazilian states. 20% of the world's oxygen is produced by the Amazon rainforest. But who's responsible and what can actually be done? In the latest blame game, activists have denounced Bolsonaro's policies for emboldening farmers to clear land for crops and for their fields and cattle. However, on Wednesday, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro refuted the claim, adding they're looking at non-governmental organizations and environmental groups as those responsible for causing the fires as a smear campaign against his persona and the government. All this after funding was stripped from NGOs. Let's listen.
So it could be we're examining, we are not affirming, but there might be a criminal action on the end of NGOs to call attention to me as the president and to the government of Brazil. That is the war we face. I am not confirming anything, but we have to combat the crime, and we will need to see who is the possible responsible party for it. But it is my understanding that there are sectors being backed out and representing powerful interests outside of Brazil.
All right, joining us now to break it all down, Natalia de Campos. She's the leader of Defend Democracy in Brazil Collective and coordinator of the campaign to cancel Bolsonaro and save the Amazon. Thank you for being with us, Natalia. So first, let's start with this, the devastating fires. They have expanded now across 3 states. What is the extent and impact of the destruction, and how are the local and indigenous communities reacting to Bolsonaro's latest policies?
Thank you for having us. I would like to say that it's a very important moment for the international community to be aware of what's really happening. I think what's happening is really impacting the communities in their livelihood, like the source of their food, the source of nature around them, and water. So it is a real impact. You know, a lot of times we think of the Amazon as a very abstract, the lungs of the world, as we call it, but there's real communities that are being affected without, like, losing their homes, losing their livelihood. All the animals that they consume or that they hunt are being destroyed, are dying, and also there is a lot of misunderstanding about the extent of what the destruction is. Not just the forests, but also how the current president has been opening up for illegal mining to be understood as a possible way of exploiting the Amazon that is not permitted by law, as well as the deforestation, as we know, and the fires that open up space for cattle raising, as well as soybean planting.
Right, so for the farming. So we heard earlier Bolsonaro just kind of stopped short of exactly blaming NGOs for the fires, and he implied it was a smear campaign against him personally. What's the basis for his argument, and how was this received by the Brazilian press and the rest of the global community?
Right, so the global community is really outraged by it, especially a lot of the NGOs that are in Brazil and outside of Brazil helping bring awareness over the indigenous concerns and also the forest and climate change concerns regarding the Amazon. Because everything he said is really incorrect. It's really criminal statements that he has put out in the last couple of weeks about the murder of the indigenous leader in the YMP community, from the NGOs now potentially having put fire, which is a complete lie, just saying that he could be blamed for that. So it is a very irresponsible statement, even though he says he cannot affirm completely. He really knows that the power of his words can affect the communities.
Yeah, this is obviously very similar to why people refer to him as Trump of the tropics. He knows really how to get the press riled up and paying attention to him. So then how are the Brazilian indigenous groups and as well as the environmental groups, how are they responding to these accusations made by Bolsonaro?
So we have a very concrete example, for example, with the YMP community, where the indigenous leader was murdered a few weeks ago, and then they asked the police, the federal police. So first, Bolsonaro put out a statement saying that they had to investigate. He wasn't believing that it was a murder, so that the communities asked for a real investigation. The federal police did an exhumation of the body, and that was of the indigenous leader Amida YMP, and it wasn't. They put out a statement that he was drowned, and that wasn't really true. So the organizations themselves, the indigenous groups, have put out statements that we have also helped translate and bring out to the world outside of Brazil to show that that's not really what's happening, that there was really a murder, there were real invaders and miners in the YMP land, for one instance, for example, and that they cannot blame the indigenous people or other communities for that murder. So there's a lot of people are trying to take their own steps outside of the governmental world, putting out statements via the APIB, which is the international, the indigenous peoples groupings that speak for many communities, as well as the main NGOs that help them put the word out.
I see. And as we know, Donald Trump and his administration, they have really gotten very close to the Bolsonaro government. What are some of these agreements you think that they have made on U.S. Free trade with Brazil and other partnerships with Brazil? And also, can you comment on Bolsonaro considering appointing his son as an ambassador to Washington?
Yeah, so regarding Trump and his agreements, they just signed on August 1st an agreement for the industry, the construction industry of the U.S. to be having more rights to the Brazilian construction environment, which was restricted to Brazilian companies before. And that opens up more agreements that they are negotiating, not signed yet, of the free trade agreement, that could definitely damage more these communities. One, because the agribusiness would expand a lot, and also because it would also get out of the minerals and all the richness of the Amazon would also be opened up for exploitation by American organizations. So regarding his appointment of the son, is a complete scandal. It's a nepotism. He's trying to get that approved through the Senate. We hope that this is not going to be. He is planning to be here in September to the inauguration of that position of ambassador to his son. And if it does, we'll be there to protest. And then we'll have several groups that are joining up with us, and then they're going to be there too.
Yeah, certainly a scandal. Nepotism at its finest here, as in display for the whole world. Okay, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us and what's happening in Brazil. Natalia de Campos, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, check this out. Russia has sent a humanoid robot to space. The robot was enclosed inside this Soyuz capsule launched earlier this morning from Kazakhstan. The robot is expected to dock at the International Space Station for tests on a new booster rocket. The robot, which was in the commander's seat, holding a small Russian flag in its right hand, sent out a tweet shortly after orbiting saying that the first part of onboard tests went as planned. All right, let's head over to Regina Ham in our Sports HQ. Regina, David Beckham has a huge mess on his hands with his new MLS team. Tell us about it.
It's not looking good. And, you know, while St. Louis is celebrating its MLS expansion team, over in Florida, it's bad news bears for Inter Miami on a very serious note. The proposed site for David Beckham's new franchise, Inter Miami, is closed until further notice. Analysis of the soil by environmentalists showed extremely high levels of arsenic and other pollutants, twice the legal limit allowed by law. Contamination came from a municipal incinerator that happened to occupy the site years prior. The $1 billion development of Mel Reese Country Club and Golf Course into the new 25,000-seat Freedom Park Soccer Stadium, highly touted in the Sunshine State. Other venues on the 131-acre site include practice fields, malls, and offices. Cleanup of the site is estimated at $50 million, and the disposal poses a threat to Inter Miami's future, with the squad expected to play in the MLS 2020 season, but that might be delayed pending approval. We're entering the 25th week of the MLS season, and it is rivalry week as the New York Red Bulls head down I-95 to visit DC United for an Atlantic Cup battle. The visitors from the Big Apple drew first blood, and it's a left-footed bomb from Alejandro Romero Gamara, a.k.a. Kaku. Red Bulls are up 1-0, and it is absolutely a beautiful goal. Poor defending from DC United, absolutely horrible all the way around. No one knows what they're doing. They just absolutely fail. Wayne Rooney elbowing Christian Castells, earning a yellow card for that shot right there. That decision not good enough, and Rooney is seeing red after a VAR review. The ref clearly telling him your time is up and you are done. Not a good look. Cards kept flying in the first half stoppage time. United's Paul Arriola tries to get the edge over Amro Tarek, gets a free kick out of it. Tarek, though, gets a yellow card, not happy. Second one of the game means it's a red. He's out, and he is angry. Easy to see, though, Arriola and Tarek just sliding into each other. Easy call there. Second half, it's United newcomer Ola Kamara on a very bizarre angle, but wow, just bends it right into the net. It is incredible. That is an equalizing goal for the men in black and red. A absolutely wicked goal for Kamara, and his first in a start in a DC uniform, so that's got to be exciting. But Red Bulls' Danielle Royer on a penalty kick later, converting it. United goalkeeper Bel Hamid goes absolutely the wrong way. New York's up 2-1, and it stays that way through an 11-minute second half stoppage time, United falling 2-1. But over on the West Coast, we go to the LAFC match against San Jose Earthquakes. Monster of a goal from Carlos Vela. He ran on a pass from Diego Rossi, evaded a slide tackle from Guram Kashia, and a sidestep Florian Jungwirth to drill it past Daniel Vega, giving LAFC a 3-0 lead. It's just beautiful to watch. Footwork is incredible, and pretty much taking down four guys as he rounds the keeper into the net. LAFC shut out San Jose for first place in the West. And Manila, I have a fun fact for you about Carlos Vela. Okay. He has 26 goals, 15 assists, so 41 total. That is more than 15 MLS teams have scored all season. The Vancouver Whitecaps have 27 goals. He has 26.
Give that man a raise.
It's wild.
All right, thanks for that, Regina. That's it for us right now, guys. Come back tomorrow starting at noon. I'm Manila Chan. We'll see you back tomorrow right here on In Question.
Aeroflot, Russian Airlines.